Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Sandra Melgar. Sandra Melgar often lies in her small prison cell, reflecting on the unexpected turns her life has taken. She never thought she'd become a widow and a suspect in her husband's murder. It's unbelievable that a year and a half after his death, a grand jury indicted her, and nearly 5 years later, a jury convicted her based on circumstantial evidence alone, with no clear motive or physical proof linking her to the crime. At 59, every day since her husband's passing has been a living nightmare. In a recent interview, Sandra said that she still catches herself thinking she'll go back home. Her blue eyes were red and puffy as tears streamed down her pale cheeks. She mentioned wanting to tell him things, forgetting he's gone. It doesn't feel like he's really gone. It's like he's temporarily away or on a trip. She added that she tries not to dwell on it, before pausing tearfully. Sandra has been incarcerated at the William P. Hobby Unit, a women's prison in rural Texas, for the past 10 months. Despite her circumstances, she has managed to stay connected with her friends and family, many of whom remain convinced of her innocence. She regularly talks to her daughter, Elizabeth Liz Melgar Rose, although the noisy prison atmosphere and her soft voice often make their conversations difficult. Sandra also keeps in touch with her friends through letters, and they update her on her Pomeranian, Lola, who was present at her house on the night of the incident. Most weekends, Liz's mother, Sandra, gets to spend a couple of hours with a rotating group of friends and family, thanks to the efforts of one of her closest friends who coordinates these weekly visits. Liz acts as her mother's strongest advocate, taking it upon herself to speak on her behalf and passionately discussing what she sees as a grave injustice that has taken a devastating toll on her mother's life, depriving her of both her husband and her own freedom. Sandra is haunted by the memories of the fateful night of December 23, 2012, when her husband met his tragic end. Her inability to recall the events of that night has sparked suspicions among investigators who find it suspicious. Despite this, Sandra remains resolute in her assertion that she did not commit the crime. As Sandra lies in her prison cell, her thoughts often wander back to the evening she and Jamie had celebrated their 32nd wedding anniversary on December 23, 2012. That night, Sandra Melgar was jolted awake by the incessant barking of their dogs, her vision blurred as she struggled to orient herself in the dimly lit room. Her body ached and her head throbbed as she lay on the closet floor, her hands and feet bound behind her back, her undergarments soiled. Sandra, at 5 feet 4 inches tall, attempted to stretch out her legs and roll over to look through a gap under her closet door. However, her bindings and the 2 hip replacements she had undergone restricted her movement. Even if she could manage to free herself, a chair had been placed in front of the door to block her access, with the door handle inaccessible from the outside. Inside the bedroom closet, Sandra's husband of 32 years, Sandra Melgar, lay dead, with 31 stab wounds on his hands and chest. The previously white walls of the closet were now stained with blood, and a gray telephone cord had been used to bind his feet together. A medical examiner's report confirmed that Jamie's injuries were all defensive wounds, indicating that he had fought back against his attacker rather than trying to escape. A particularly vicious blow had almost severed his right thumb, which likely caused the extensive blood spatter found in the closet and bedroom. The bedroom was in disarray, with dresser drawers open and contents scattered everywhere. Clothes, books, and pill bottles littered the floor. Sandra's black purse and red wallet had been rummaged through, and their contents were spread out on the blood-stained white comforter. A small white medic stool at the foot of the bed had bloodstains on it, suggesting it had been used as a makeshift surface for the attacker's knife. The back of a nearby wooden chair was also stained with blood. In the jacuzzi bathtub, where Sandra and Jamie had celebrated their 32nd wedding anniversary the night before, several items bore witness to the tragic events. These included a white blouse, a green towel, and a silver chef knife with a 6-inch blade, all stained with blood droplets. The police later identified this knife as the murder weapon, which had been used just hours before the horrific events unfolded. Sandra and Jamie had been celebrating their 32 years of marriage with a romantic dinner at their favorite Mexican restaurant. They had planned to continue their celebration in a relaxing way, with a jacuzzi session accompanied by candles, cocktails, strawberries, and whipped cream. Even after more than 3 decades together, their love for each other remained strong, as Sandra would later tell the authorities. The couple's journey began during their senior year at Lamar High School. Jamie, with his unruly black hair and a somewhat awkward teenage mustache, was immediately drawn to the 17-year-old Sandra, who had blue eyes and blonde hair and sat in front of him in class. At first, Sandra resisted Jamie's advances for weeks, but she eventually agreed to join him and a group of friends for ice skating. Unbeknownst to her, Jamie had orchestrated the whole event, and when she arrived, only Jamie and his best friend were there. The others had mysteriously disappeared. Jamie's charming nature, humor, and penchant for corny jokes eventually won Sandra over. She admired his intelligence, thoughtfulness, and sense of humor, while Jamie appreciated her intelligence, down-to-earth personality, and lack of pretentiousness. They soon became inseparable, and in 1980, 2 years after graduating from high school, they got married in a courthouse ceremony in downtown Houston. On the anniversary of their union, Sandra and Jamie spent a romantic evening in their jacuzzi, reminiscing about their shared history and dreaming of their future together. They discussed selling their home to embark on a world tour, visiting iconic destinations like the Grand Canyon and Ireland, and witnessing the breathtaking Northern Lights. With Jamie's retirement as a computer programmer with the Houston Independent School District just 5 months away, they envisioned buying a beachfront property where they could settle down after their travels. As they chatted, they took turns giving each other massages, culminating in a romantic moment of intimacy. After 2 blissful hours in the jacuzzi, their peaceful evening was abruptly interrupted by their dogs barking. Jamie got out of the jacuzzi, wrapped a towel around himself, and put on Sandra's slippers to attend to the dogs. Little did Sandra know that this would be the last time she would see her husband alive. When Sandra woke up approximately 15 hours later, she was horrified to find herself bound and gagged in her closet, her hands and feet tied, her body sore, and her undergarments soiled. Jamie was nowhere to be found, and the frantic barking of their dogs was now accompanied by unfamiliar voices inside her home. Sandra screamed out in desperation. Herman Melgar stood outside his brother Jaime's house, confused, just after 4:30 p.m. His brother had invited him and his family for dinner, but now, despite ringing the doorbell and calling, there was no response from Jaime or his wife Sandra. What struck Herman as unusual was that Jamie's black truck was parked in the driveway and Sandra's silver car was inside the open garage. He told his family to wait by the front door while he took a look around the backyard, glancing over the fence. Noticing the plastic tarp hanging from the pergola on the back porch, Herman remembered that Jamie had been working on various home improvement projects. Returning to the front yard, Herman decided to check the laundry room door inside the garage. To his surprise, the door was unlocked, so he entered the house. As he stepped inside, Herman was met with an unsettling atmosphere. The house was dimly lit, gray and stuffy, with all the blinds drawn shut. The dogs were barking and jumping around, which added to the eerie feeling that Herman's daughter Marissa would later describe as unsettling. It was at that moment that they heard muffled screams. Herman rushed to the back of the house and found a large chair propped against the bathroom closet door. Inside the closet, Sandra lay on the floor, wearing a black satin nightgown, desperately screaming for help. Herman and his wife Maria struggled to remove the tightly bound restraints from Sandra's arms and legs. Herman got a pair of scissors from the bathroom to help free her. Meanwhile, Sandra kept asking about Jamie's whereabouts. She had visible bruises on her arms, including a dark one on her left bicep. After they finally freed her, Sandra rushed into the bedroom and found Jamie's lifeless body protruding from the closet. She checked for a pulse, but it was clear from his cold, pale, and naked body that he had passed away. Sandra covered Jamie's body with a blue jacket, and Maria escorted her back to the bathroom. When the paramedics arrived, Sandra was in hysterics, making it difficult for her to communicate with Stephanie Roberts, the first paramedic to arrive on the scene. Roberts' report stated that Sandra was in shock, cried periodically, and had lost all sense of time. Her last memory was of around 1 a.m. that morning, unaware that 15 hours had passed and it was now evening. The police documented bruises on Sandra's hands and arms, as well as a small scratch on her left thumb, but found no blood on her. Sandra told the police that after Jamie let the dogs in, she got out of the bathtub and went to her closet to get dressed. Her next memory was waking up in the closet at an unknown time, and at some point she screamed for help, but then fell back asleep, possibly having a seizure. Sandra had several underlying medical conditions, including lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, and grand mal seizures, which had forced her to resign from her job as a licensed vocational nurse. She believed she could no longer perform her duties effectively due to her seizures. In the weeks leading up to Jamie's murder, Sandra had experienced auras, which she knew were warning signs of an impending seizure. During these seizures, she would sleep for hours and wake up in a state of confusion, disorientation, and severe pain. As crime scene investigators carefully searched the house, Sandra was taken to an interrogation room at the Harris County Sheriff's Office. She mentioned that the room was too cold and was subsequently asked to take a polygraph test. Sergeants Cazal and Douay questioned her for 3 hours, focusing on the 36 hours leading up to Jamie's death. Sandra spoke quietly and complained of a headache during the interrogation. She remembered some details clearly, such as removing her boots in the bedroom, changing in the bathroom, and recalling their conversation in the jacuzzi. However, she struggled to remember other details, and her recollection of time was imprecise. When questioned about the timeline, Sandra initially stated that Jamie had left her for 15 minutes to let the dogs in before she got out of the jacuzzi. Later, she suggested it might have been around 5 minutes. Sandra admitted that she was not good at estimating time and was making an educated guess. 2 days after the murder, Liz met with Cazal and Douay to report that several items were missing from the house, including a TV from the bedroom and Sandra's medication bottles of hydrocodone and phenobarbital. She reminded them that a backpack containing a gaming system and games had been left in the garage, which she had previously mentioned to detectives. Liz also shared information about her mother's seizures and health issues, expressing her concern for her mother's fragile state and possible post-traumatic stress. Although she hoped that something might trigger a memory later, this meeting did not yield any significant breakthroughs. Liz continued to follow up with phone calls, even pointing out damage to one of her parents' rental homes. However, the authorities eventually stopped responding to her inquiries, leaving both Liz and Sandra unaware of the investigation's progress. A year and a half after the incident, Sandra was secretly indicted for Jamie's murder by a grand jury in July 2014. Because of state law, grand jury proceedings are confidential, keeping the public unaware of the discussions and evidence presented during the process. Despite the indictment, Sandra's case progressed slowly over the next 3 years, involving at least 4 prosecutors from the district attorney's office, until it was assigned to Colleen Barnett in May 2017. Colleen Barnett had rejoined the DA's office in January of that year, following a 4-year break during Kim A's tenure as district attorney. Throughout her 24-year career, Barnett had built a reputation as a diligent and fair-minded prosecutor, according to both her colleagues and the attorneys who had opposed her in court. She had handled over 70 murder trials, including the high-profile capital murder case of Suzanne Basso, who was executed for luring a mentally disabled man to Texas with the promise of marriage and then killing him. Barnett knew that Sandra's case was tough. There was no clear motive, no confession, and no direct evidence linking Sandra to the crime. Despite the challenges, Barnett was convinced of Sandra's guilt. During the 13-day trial that began in August 2017, Barnett presented Sandra as a cold-blooded killer who carefully planned Jamie's murder, luring him into their bedroom with the promise of sex. Barnett told the jury that Sandra had used a gray telephone cord to tie Jamie's feet, then fatally stabbed him from chest to neck. The prosecutor highlighted the discovery of a bag of sex toys on the bed, which Sandra later claimed was a joke gift from a friend. Although Barnett couldn't exactly say why Sandra did it, she offered several possible motives, including Jamie's life insurance policy with HISD and Sandra's alleged desire to end their marriage. However, as a Jehovah's Witness, Sandra's religion did not allow divorce. Sandra's attorney, George Ma Sechrist, a well-established and respected legal expert, presented a contrasting image of the seemingly fragile woman sitting at the defense table. According to Sechrist, Sandra was a victim of investigators who had jumped to conclusions, forming a theory within 2 hours of arriving at the crime scene. He backed this claim by pointing out that they had initially attempted to file murder charges while the crime scene investigators were still processing her home. Sechrist emphasized the lack of physical evidence linking Sandra to the crime, highlighting the fact that her blood was not found at the scene and that she had no cuts on her hands. He offered an alternative explanation. Sandra had been the victim of a home invasion, during which she suffered a head injury and was bound in her closet while the intruders killed her husband. For the jurors watching Barnett and Sechrist in the courtroom, the atmosphere was likened to a high-stakes boxing match, as the two lawyers clashed in a battle of wits. Barnett landed a significant blow with the help of Celestina Rossi, a blood spatter expert and crime scene reconstructionist from the Montgomery County Sheriff's Office. Rossi testified that the evidence at the crime scene contradicted the idea of a home invasion. She highlighted several key points, including the absence of signs of forced entry, the untouched dresser drawers in the bedroom, and a lit candle on Jamie's nightstand, which suggested that no struggle had occurred near the closet where Jamie died. Rossi explained that most of the blood was confined to the closet, with a few exceptions, such as spatter on the back of a chair, the white medical stool, and tiny droplets on the comforter. According to Rossi, this spatter was likely caused by the injury to the artery near Jamie's thumb. Rossi concurred with the medical examiner's report, stating that all of Jamie's wounds were defensive in nature. She also noted that Jamie's loaded handgun was inches from his body in the closet, untouched. Rossi emphasized that in a situation like this, one's instinct is to try to disarm their attacker rather than shoot them, even if they are approaching with a knife. After 8 hours of deliberation spanning several days, the jury, comprising 8 men and 4 women, reached a guilty verdict for Sandra on the charge of murder, sentencing her to 27 years in prison. Although this sentence was shorter than the maximum possible 99 years, it was still a significant sentence. In explaining their decision, the jury foreman later stated that by the time Sandra would be released, she would be in her early 70s and might have the opportunity to see her grandchildren, adding that they considered this decision humane as they did not view Sandra as a threat to society. When District Judge Kelly Johnson announced the verdict, Sandra let out a loud shriek and nearly collapsed into her chair. The courtroom, filled with supporters who had been convinced that the trial was merely a formality to prove Sandra's innocence, was left in stunned disbelief. Despite attempts to reassure Sandra that everything would turn out fine, perhaps to boost their own morale, the reality of the situation suddenly became clear, and everything fell apart. Sandra, clad in a red blazer and relying on a cane, was escorted out of the courtroom, where she paused to share a final, emotional hug with Liz. Once they released each other, Liz crumpled to the floor, overwhelmed by grief. Having lost both her father and mother to a justice system she felt had failed them catastrophically, Liz was left feeling utterly alone and devastated. The jury foreman staunchly defended the prosecution's case, arguing it was the most plausible explanation, despite being rooted in speculation and theory. He highlighted the discrepancies in Sandra's account and questioned the legitimacy of her alleged seizure that night. While he conceded it was possible the jury had erred, he ultimately stood by their verdict. Welcome to my channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. This harrowing tale unfolded in North America, with Mexico City as its backdrop. The central figure in this story is Alejandra Lafuente, a resident of Mexico City. Alejandra is described as having striking brunette hair with bright brown eyes that highlight her thick, black lashes. She had a fit and athletic build, which she diligently maintained through fitness routines, yoga, and breathing exercises. Alejandra took great pride in her appearance and loved self-care rituals. Frequent visits to beauty salons, massage sessions, and spas showcased her commitment to personal upkeep. During warm weather, she could be found lounging on the beach while engaging in scientific work. On cloudy days, she often visited tanning salons. It's safe to say that Alejandra had a strong sense of self-love and viewed herself as an epitome of feminine beauty. Career-wise, Alejandra also exhibited ambition and determination not to lag behind others' successes. Her father is Dr. Alberto Dente, an esteemed psychiatrist well known for his research into mental illnesses such as schizophrenia and manic disorders. Notably revered for both his scientific contributions and experiments with patients, which many view as groundbreaking, Dr. Dente's achievements set high standards for Alejandra, who aspired to attain similar levels of success. She pursued a similar path as her father. To achieve this, she enrolled at one of the top universities for psychiatry and graduated with honors. Her perseverance, resourcefulness, and extraordinary intelligence, along with her father's connections, greatly assisted her in writing and defending her thesis on manic syndrome. However, Alejandra did not later engage in psychiatry. She became drawn to the field of psychotherapy instead. With the financial support from her father, the young professional obtained a license and set up her own practice in a new business center located in the heart of the capital city. There was no shortage of clients, but Alejandra decided to focus solely on women. Women struggling with eating disorders, depression, relationship issues, and low self-esteem sought her counseling services. Alejandra worked diligently to help solve family problems. Yet, despite her professional success, her personal life was less fulfilling. Alejandra's first marriage ended in divorce. She had two charming girls who inherited their mother's eyes and their father's sense of humor. Despite the failed marriage, Alejandra was not discouraged. To her, having two children was not a reason to neglect herself or give up on finding happiness again. She still aspired to meet a man who could be both an ideal partner for her and a good father figure for her daughters. Sometime after their separation, Alejandra's ex-husband would visit their home on weekends to spend time with their daughters and assist Alejandra with household chores if necessary. These visits had become routine for the couple. On one such visit, Alejandra asked him to enter through the backyard because she claimed that the lock on the front door was jammed. The man entered as requested. Alejandra told him that their youngest daughter was bathing and asked him to join them in the bathroom without suspecting anything amiss. The man entered the bathroom and saw tape on the floor. Where was his daughter? The bathtub was filled, but no one. Suddenly, right at that very second, he sensed something was terribly wrong. His ex-wife stood behind him with a hammer in her hand. She struck him on the head with all her might, then delivered another blow. He fell instantly. A gaping hole in his skull poured blood everywhere. Later, experts determined the man had no chance to save himself. Death came almost immediately after the first blow from the heavy weapon. His eldest daughter, who unexpectedly returned early from a friend's house, witnessed this truly horrifying scene. Alejandra, it was determined, suffered from severe mental distress. She frequently directed her anger toward friends and even her husband, leaving visible scratches on his arms and neck. Housemates constantly witnessed her tantrums over seemingly nothing and erratic behavior. This time, things went out of control. The eldest daughter ran out of the house screaming for help instantly, and a neighbor rushed over to call the police squad. Alejandra was arrested and charged with murder by professionals at the station and placed in a cell where she stayed for a month until her first hearing. At trial, Alejandra denied any guilt. Her lawyers argued self-defense. According to them, her ex-husband was intensely jealous of Alejandra and falsely accused her of bringing men into the house, delusions that could affect their little girl's psyche negatively. She said that he showed up unexpectedly at his ex-wife's house, sneaking through the back door to catch her with another man. When he found Alejandra in the bathroom, he allegedly pounced on her and she had to defend herself, resulting in 2 blows to his head. On June 14, 2012, the sentence was handed down. Considering the evidence presented by the defense and the presence of 2 minor children, Alejandra was sentenced to 1 year and 4 months. Thanks to the coordinated work of lawyers and the financial support of her father, the term bars was replaced with a suspended sentence. A couple of months later, an appeal was filed again with a request to drop the charges with by. The argument is assault in self-defense. Human rights activists felt deep sympathy for Alejandra, portrayed at trial as a victim of domestic violence. As a result, the court reviewed the case anew and handed down an acquittal. Following her release, Alejandra continued her psychological counseling. She also maintained an image as a victim of gender inequality, fighting for her rights, just like many women in North America do. Ultimately, this portrayal made Alejandra even more popular among potential clients. Soon after, Maria Alejandra met Alan Carrera, a prominent Mexican businessman and son of Adrian Carrera Francis. Alan was tall and handsome with a statuesque stature. His father had been head of special services for the Central District and achieved considerable success in his career. Quickly, Alan expanded his business, creating a chain of construction stores that popped up all over the country. However, not all parts of Alan's business were above board. Some aspects were deeply entwined with criminal activities, which led to his father's removal from his position after one financial fraud incident was uncovered. Additionally, Alan had ties with a criminal group engaged in transporting psychotropic substances to the United States. The base for this illicit operation was located in a border town and guarded by bribed police officers. This group controlled a significant portion of psychoactive substance trafficking in the South. Evidence finally tied Alan's father to these illegal activities. Under pressure during interrogation, he gave a statement implicating himself and faced a potential 20-year prison sentence due to these revelations. On July 18, 2000, Adrian Carrera was released early. Following his release, he dedicated all his time to his son and legitimate business. His son grew up quickly, adopting his father's views and experiences. After graduating from college, Alan Carrera decided to follow in his father's footsteps and Alan showed a keen interest in a household appliance store. Despite his young age, he managed it entirely on his own. While it wasn't as large as his father's enterprise, it generated substantial revenue. Alan was always surrounded by many admirers, but he had been in love with a classmate since childhood and eventually married her. She was intelligent, beautiful, and from a respectable family. Their marriage was brief yet eventful. They had a lovely daughter together. However, the demands of work and Alan's frequent absences led to their divorce. The separation was extremely difficult for him, as he had loved her since high school. Subsequent relationships failed to bring him joy, leading to feelings of loneliness and sadness that resulted in excessive drinking. Alan developed a harmful habit as he tried various ways to cope with his prolonged depression and affinity for alcohol, attending meetings. Eventually, fate brought him to renowned psychiatrist Dr. Alberto. Interestingly enough, Dr. Alberto was the father of Maria Alejandra, Alan's ex-wife, who was also navigating through a challenging divorce herself. Despite their separation, she couldn't allow herself to be close to anyone else either. Maria Alejandra also sought counseling from a therapist. However, Dr. Alberto explained that ethically he could not treat both her and Alan simultaneously. He recommended she see another professional therapist without disclosing that this therapist would be Alejandra, his daughter. He was described as a pleasant man and quite wealthy. Without much thought, Alejandra asked her client to bring her ex-husband for another consultation. According to the therapist, she could resolve their issue in a single session and break the strong bond between the former spouses. From the first moments of the confidential session, Alejandra began implementing her plan to seduce the entrepreneur. The results were immediate. Right after the session, Alan invited the therapist for a cup of coffee to discuss family problems. Quite rapidly, an affair developed between them. Soon enough, Alan's ex-wife discovered their relationship and was shocked. She even considered reporting the incident to the doctor's ethics committee, but ultimately did not. Alejandra, being a very competent specialist, managed to convince her client to let go of her jealousy and move on from her former spouse. As a result, Alan's ex-wife decided not to file any complaints and discontinued their sessions. Meanwhile, Alan and Alejandra's relationship progressed quickly. A few months after their first date, they decided to move in together. 2 months later, they decided to formalize their relationship. However, Alan had no inkling of his fiancée's hidden secrets or the reasons behind her divorce from her ex-husband. In April 2014, Alan decided to visit his parents over a weekend and used the opportunity to talk about his beloved and their upcoming wedding. Alan's parents were extremely surprised by this news so late in the process. They had never heard of Alejandra before, which struck them as very unusual. A week after meeting with his parents, Alan and Alejandra registered their marriage. Interestingly though, Alejandra asked her husband not to invite friends and relatives. No invitations were sent out at all. The wedding was intended to be modest due to budget constraints, which did not permit inviting everyone they would have liked. However, as it turned out later, the bride's father did attend the marriage ceremony. Initially, the young couple's life seemed like a fairy tale, full of happiness and numerous plans and desires. But this didn't last long. Alejandra couldn't conceal her hysterical character, which foreshadowed the horrifying conclusion of this story that no one anticipated. The relationship between the newlyweds began to change dramatically. Alan was a rather secretive person and didn't share details of his personal life with friends. Consequently, little was known about what happened behind their closed doors. Nonetheless, it became evident that their former relationship had developed significant cracks, and the couple no longer appeared as happy as they once were. After meeting Alejandra, Alan distanced himself from his family. The final quarrel was the wedding to which his parents were not invited. After this event, they even ceased calling each other. Alan's remaining friends noticed that his spouse grew increasingly nervous and sometimes behaved inadequately, quickly losing her temper. Following a few such incidents, Alan felt deeply ashamed and decided to minimize joint meetings. Quarrels in the family occurred daily and were almost always unfounded. One evening, according to her own testimony, Alejandra decided to go through her husband's cell phone and discovered correspondences with several women containing inappropriate content. Understandably, it was impossible for her to ignore such things. Alejandra reported in court that her husband beat her, insulted her, and humiliated her in every possible way. When she discovered his infidelity as well, saving the marriage seemed pointless. For reasons unknown, Alejandra did not pursue traditional methods of psychotherapy to try and salvage the relationship. Instead, consumed by thoughts of her husband's cheating, she resolved to deal with Alan using a method already familiar to her. Once she made this decision, all her attention focused on devising a perfect murder plan. While Alan went about his regular, measured routine, he remained oblivious to the looming events. He communicated infrequently with his family. However, he couldn't ignore the annual feast celebrating his grandfather's birthday. As expected, Alan attended the event. Nevertheless, his parents made it clear that his wife wasn't welcome in their home. This situation upset Alejandra and worsened the couple's relationship. On October 31, 2014, Alan's phone last sent a text confirming he had arrived home safely after the party. From that moment on, his absence extended to his work too. This was highly unusual because Alan was known for his dedication to work. He hadn't missed work before, especially with an important store launch approaching where his presence was crucial. The cause of this sudden disappearance lay in Alejandra's horrifying plan executed after Alan's return from the celebration. Following a fierce argument, she spiked his milk with a powerful sleeping pill before suffocating him with a pillow. Alejandra watched as Alan struggled unsuccessfully to remove the pillow and catch his breath. After that, Alejandra dragged Alan's body to their neighbor's garden to retrieve an electric saw. Bearing a grim smile, she dismembered her husband's body into pieces. She then bagged the remains and ensured no identifying features remained by removing fingers and teeth. It was these details that would help the investigation in identifying the individual if the body was discovered. Alejandra packed all the bags into suitcases to transport the corpse out of the house without drawing suspicion. However, she did not succeed. As dawn approached, Alejandra could not leave the house with the suitcase unnoticed. An elderly neighbor who suffered from insomnia watched her from her window. She found the young woman's early departure and strange behavior. Additionally, for some reason, Alejandra's husband did not help lift the heavier suitcases, which added to her strange behavior as she continually looked around. At dawn, Alejandra returned home, which further surprised the vigilant neighbor. As it later turned out, Alejandra had scattered bags containing her ex-husband's remains across different neighborhoods to cover her tracks. The following day, she resumed her normal life. On November 6, 2014, police officers in Mexico City made a gruesome discovery. Human remains were found in a vacant lot near the city's outskirts. A few days later, bags containing arms and legs were located in various parts of the capital. The most chilling detail was the absence of fingers from these limbs. Teams of officers were quickly assembled and they methodically combed through the streets. Their primary objective was to locate the head and other missing parts of the victim and prevent further atrocities from occurring. Despite their efforts, the fingers and head were never found. However, by forensic experts, it was determined that all discovered remains belonged to the same individual. Sadly, without fingers or teeth, identifying this person proved impossible. To divert suspicion from herself, Alejandra began sending messages to Alan's relatives. Her aim was to avert suspicion. However, she only aggravated matters. Unbeknownst to her, Alan had recently distanced himself from his family and had no contact with his relatives. Alejandra informed Alan's parents that they were going on vacation and would be out of reach. This plan quickly unraveled when Alberto, Alejandra's father, began making phone calls to Alan's father's house. Alberto sought to find out if his son-in-law's family had any idea of Alejandra's whereabouts. He hadn't heard from her in some time, and the family was quite worried about missing their counseling sessions. Later, Alberto reached out to Alan's relatives again. This time, he informed them that his daughter had been located but had to be forcibly admitted to a clinic. She was suffering from depression due to her husband's infidelity. This news deeply alarmed the relatives, leading them to search for Alan without success. Subsequently, Alan's family turned to the police for help. Laboratory experts decided they needed to compare the remains recently discovered with Alan's characteristics. The resemblance was 100%. His relatives also identified him without a doubt. This was particularly hard on Alan's grandfather. Soon after the identification, he fell ill with heart disease, as Alan was his only grandson. The investigation team obtained a search warrant for Alan's home and office. They discovered a patch of freshly disturbed earth in the backyard. Upon digging, they found human fingers and teeth. Alejandra was immediately apprehended. More blood traces were found in one of the rooms, as well as on the trunk of a car and in the garage. Initially, Alejandra denied any involvement, hoping she could escape punishment as she reportedly had with her previous husband. However, investigators quickly pieced together the case. An elderly witness provided critical testimony. Her timeline matched Alan's estimated time of death. It came to light that Alejandra used her job to obtain a powerful sleeping pill, a medication typically accessible only to medical professionals, which further implicated her in the crime. The evidence linked Alejandra directly to her husband's brutal murder. CCTV footage corroborated that Alan had entered their house but never left. Additionally, this footage confirmed that suitcases were later removed from the house. On December 10, 2014, the jury delivered its verdict. Ale got life imprisonment for murder with cruelty and an attempt to hide it. Using her official position didn't help. Her father's connections and bribes couldn't save her either. All he managed was a closed trial, away from the public eye and the press. Sadly, he did it for his career. Now, hardly anyone will seek help from a specialist who raised such a ruthless monster and couldn't spot problems in his own daughter. During the trial, thoughts about the death of Alejandra's first husband popped up too. But the passage of time meant no evidence was found. There were even whispers about her father's involvement in what happened. People suspected he worked with her on these crimes out of some misguided scientific interest. Yet, no proof surfaced. After many appeals from the victim's side, her sentence changed to death. This is almost unheard of in Mexico today. Death sentences are super rare. Plus, she can't ask for a case review. Her house and property must go to the victim's family. Though, who can be comforted by that when their loved one is gone? Alejandra showed she was pragmatic and cruel. She had major mental health issues, although medical exams said otherwise. Influenced by her father and using her position, she executed her manic plans without fear. After her first crime went unpunished, which let her off the hook, Alejandra felt untouchable and kept doing evil things. Maybe Alan would still be alive if this dreadful woman hadn't been acquitted before. Don't you think justice needs to catch up faster? We can't let monsters roam free because of loopholes or failures in our system. Let's ensure people like Alejandra face consequences right away so they don't get a chance to continue their wicked ways. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Kirsten Hatfield. A mother put her daughters to bed, but when she went to their room the next morning, one of the girls was missing. The police quickly joined the search, realizing she clearly hadn't left the house of her own accord. Despite uncovering some shocking clues, the search for answers spanned years. Eventually, detectives managed to unravel the truth, and it was truly shocking. Kirsten Hatfield was born on February 12, 1989, in Midwest City, Oklahoma. Kirsten's father left the family right after her birth, leading their mother, Shannon, to move to her parents' house. They helped her raise the child, and when Kirsten turned 2, they moved to their own home. Later, Shannon got married again, and her second daughter, Faith, was born. This marriage also didn't last long, leaving Shannon to raise her daughters alone. Despite her young age, Kirsten helped her mother take care of her younger sister. Thanks to this, she became very independent and got along pretty well with Faith. The girls shared a bedroom while their mother slept in the next one. On the evening of May 13, 1997, when Kirsten was 8 years old and her sister 3, Shannon prepared the girls for sleep. Usually, she reads them a story, but this time, Faith had already fallen asleep, and Kirsten didn't want to wake her. She wished her older daughter a good night and went to her bedroom, leaving the door to the girls' room slightly ajar. She did this every night in case either of the girls woke up and called her. Somewhere around 3 a.m., Shannon was awakened by a noise coming from her daughter's room. Thinking the girls had woken up, she went to their room. However, as soon as she reached the corridor and approached the door to their bedroom, the noise stopped. Assuming the girls had gone back to sleep, she decided not to wake them and was about to return to her room. But before she did, something strange caught her eye. The door to the girls' room was completely closed, although Shannon always left it slightly open. She thought one of the girls might have closed the door, or she herself had forgotten to leave it open. Shannon approached the door, opened it slightly but didn't enter the room, then went back to sleep. The next morning, around 6:30 a.m., Shannon went to wake her children. She entered their bedroom and found that only her younger daughter, Faith, was in bed. She woke Faith up and asked where Kirsten was, but Faith didn't know. Shannon immediately began searching the entire house, but Kirsten was nowhere to be found. She looked outside, then called all of her friends whose Kirsten was friends with. She hoped Kirsten had gone to one of them, but they all said they hadn't seen her. Realizing that Kirsten had disappeared, he told Shannon to call the police and went to their house. So the Shannon called 911, and officers arrived at the scene within a few minutes. Initially, they thought Kirsten might have been hiding somewhere in the house or had gone for a walk. In their quiet town, there had never been a case of a child being abducted from their own bedroom, so the local police had never encountered anything like it. However, soon the officers realized the situation was much more serious. Upon inspecting Kirsten's room, they found the window slightly ajar with a few drops of blood on the frame. The police went outside and began examining the area around the window. A few yards away, they discovered a piece of children's underwear on the ground, stained with blood. The officers asked Shannon to confirm that it belonged to her daughter, and she recognized it. Investigators realized they were likely dealing with a kidnapping, and more officers were immediately called to the scene. When they searched the area behind and around the house, police questioned Kirsten's mother. She recounted waking up at 3 a.m. after hearing a noise. Suddenly, she realized that at that moment, an unknown criminal was likely abducting Kirsten. The search around the house yielded no results, and the police started interviewing all residents in the neighborhood. Unfortunately, none of them saw or heard anything suspicious that night. The only lead detectives could gather was that one of the neighbors was awakened by a dog barking around 3 a.m., coinciding with the time of the abduction. Failing to find any solid leads, investigators turned to a child psychologist to speak with Faith. Despite being only 3 years old, she shared that she had witnessed the abduction. However, she kept repeating only one phrase: "A bad person came and took my sister." This new information once again confirmed that Kirsten did not leave the house willingly, but it provided no further clues to identify the perpetrator or locate Kirsten. Detectives had to restart the investigation practically from scratch. Their initial suspicion leaned towards someone who knew Kirsten well, as it seemed unlikely that a stranger could abduct her from her own room without a sound. Based on the theory, the police uncovered that Kirsten's mother had a history of drug abuse. The detectives explored two possibilities. Either the mother owed money to criminals who abducted her daughter as compensation, or even more disturbingly, the mother voluntarily gave her daughter to the abductors, which would account for the nearly silent kidnapping. They spoke with Shannon, but she denied any involvement. She claimed that she had been rehabilitated from illegal substances for a long time and strongly asserted that she would never give her daughter away. The detectives did not immediately dismiss their suspicions about her, but they were unable to find any evidence that implicated the mother in the case. So, the police decided to seek the public's help, reaching out through the media and asking people to share any information related to the case. In the following days, the police department received hundreds of calls, and detectives diligently followed up on each lead. Most of them were quite superficial and lacked any valuable information. However, investigators soon received an alarming lead. A woman contacted them, expressing her suspicion that her boyfriend was involved in the abduction. She reported that he had been acting aggressively and even threatened her during a heated dispute, claiming that if she didn't comply with his demands, he would subject her to the same fate as Kirsten Hatfield. As the police investigated the suspect further, they discovered a disturbing connection. He knew Shannon's brother, suggesting that Kirsten may have been acquainted with him as well. Additionally, Kirsten, Faith, and their mother resided in a house that was once owned by Shannon's brother, indicating that the suspect might have knowledge of the home's layout. The man's background also raised red flags for the police, as he had a history of drug-related offenses and assault charges. All the evidence suggested that he could be linked to the crime. However, the man claimed he was at a bar that night. Police verified this information, and numerous witnesses confirmed his alibi, placing him at the bar until around 4 a.m., eliminating the possibility of him abducting Kirsten. Following this, investigators pursued hundreds of other leads, but all of them led to dead ends. The case stretched over months, and with each passing day, hope of finding Kirsten alive dwindled. Her mother couldn't just wait and do nothing, as the police repeatedly hit dead ends. From the early days, she tried everything in her power to locate her daughter. She gave interviews to the local media, distributed flyers, and even personally investigated various suspects in her quest for the truth. Shannon faced numerous challenges. For instance, she came up with the idea of reaching out to local businesses in the county, asking them to put flyers about Kirsten in their offices, stores, and establishments. To her surprise, many refused, citing it contradicted company policies. She also attempted to secure a meeting with the state governor, but it was unsuccessful. Shannon also organized a small center with the goal of attracting volunteers to Kirsten's case. They mainly focused on distributing flyers and engaging with the media, but Shannon encountered new problems. Some volunteers stole money, others lied about the work done, and used the media to draw attention to themselves. Despite all of this, she never gave up trying to unravel the truth for many years. Shannon, noticing the fruitless search, changed course. She got a criminology degree and became an officer to find Kirsten's kidnapper and shield others from dangerous ex-cons. Convinced the culprit had priors, she meticulously studied local violent offenders for ties to the abduction, but to no avail. At some point, Shannon resigned herself to the likelihood that Kirsten was probably no longer alive, and she would never be able to bring her back. Nevertheless, she never abandoned her quest for answers completely. The police occasionally reopened the case, examining new leads, but it yielded no results. In collaboration with the FBI, they even created a sketch of what Kirsten might look like. Years after the abduction, no one believed she was still alive. Yet, without her remains, they couldn't declare this with absolute certainty. The stagnation in the case lasted for many years until an unexpected turn of events in 2014. A woman called the police with a rather bizarre story. Her grandmother had recently passed away, and as she sorted through the remaining belongings, she found a diary. In it, the grandmother detailed how her own son had confessed to killing Kirsten Hadfield. The narrative contained such a wealth of details that detectives had no doubt about the authenticity of the information. According to the diary, the man abducted Kirsten from her bedroom and took her to a nearby town where he owned a house. There, he subjected her to heinous acts and brutally murdered her. The description of the entire process spans several pages, leaving even seasoned investigators horrified. Furthermore, the diary mentioned that the entire progress was recorded on video cassette. Detectives immediately brought in him for questioning. While they anticipated him denying everything, his words surprised them even more. He claimed no involvement in the crime, but knew who committed it because Kirsten was killed in his ex-girlfriend's house. This perplexed the police, prompting them to ask the man for the address of this house. Detectives swiftly obtained a warrant and sent in a team to thoroughly examine the property. Their first step involved spraying luminol, a substance that emits a glow upon contact with even the tiniest traces of blood, even if it had been cleaned from the scene of the crime. When the forensic experts did this, they were met with genuine shock. One of them later stated that the entire house lit up like a Christmas tree. The chemical revealed that blood was practically everywhere, and most importantly, the blood stain patterns matched the gruesome details of the murder described in the diary. Experts removed floorboards, cut out sections of wallpaper, and sent everything to the lab. They also assembled a team for excavations on the property, hoping to find Kirsten's body. In addition, the police found a box in the house containing hundreds of video cassettes, prompting them to recall the diary. They knew that one of these tapes should contain footage of the victim being abused. Detectives meticulously reviewed each tape, a process that took countless hours. However, none of the cassettes contained anything relating to the murder. The excavations also yielded no results. There were no remains or any evidence in the soil on the property. But then the detectives faced the most unexpected twist. Experts analyzing the remains of the bloodstains in the house concluded that the blood belonged to an animal, not a human. This came as an absolute shock to the police, as they were convinced they were finally on the verge of solving Kirsten's case. Instead, investigators faced yet another false lead. What this was exactly remains unknown. Perhaps someone decided to play a cruel joke on the police, or the diary was penned by an individual with mental health issues who saw information about Kirsten's abduction on the news and believed in a narrative born in their mind. Nevertheless, detectives continued to hope that sooner or later they would uncover the truth. However, no new leads emerged, and the case once again came to a standstill. In the summer of 2015, Kirsten's case was handed over to a new detective named Daryl Miller, who decided to initiate a fresh investigation. He studied all the existing documents and records, and at some point, he noticed something peculiar. To his surprise, Miller realized that over all these years, his predecessors hadn't examined the crucial pieces of evidence: the blood on the windowsill in the victim's room and on her underwear. Although these pieces of evidence were stored in the warehouse for some inexplicable reason, they hadn't been sent to the lab for analysis. Perhaps back then, the police thought the blood belonged to Kirsten, and analyzing it wouldn't yield any results. Miller decided to rectify this and sent the evidence to the lab. Soon they called him back, stating that both blood samples belonged not to Kirsten, but to an unknown male. This was a long-awaited breakthrough, but the detective faced a new challenge. The abductor's DNA sample was immediately uploaded to the FBI database, but there was no match. This could mean that he hadn't committed serious crimes, or it happened before the database's creation. Nevertheless, Miller was undeterred. He decided to collect DNA samples from all the men involved in the case since the abduction. The police compiled a list, located each person, and sent their DNA to the lab. Surprisingly, every individual willingly provided their samples right away. This discovery led investigators to consider that the murderer might not have been part of the case files. Despite this, Miller patiently awaited the results until he finally received a call from the lab. Experts had completed the analysis of one of the samples and found that it perfectly matched the blood found on the victim's windowsill and underwear. The individual was 56-year-old Anthony Palma, a neighbor of the Hatfield family who lived just across the street from them. Palma was one of the first people the police spoke to on the day of the abduction. Back then, he told them he woke up around 3 a.m. due to his dog barking. Now, with confirmation of his involvement, detectives decided to speak with him again. While DNA evidence was more than sufficient for a conviction in court, investigators hoped to extract a confession. Firstly, it would significantly expedite the trial, and secondly, only he knew where Kirsten's body was, making it nearly impossible to locate her remains without his cooperation. Detectives chose to proceed cautiously. They invited Anthony for questioning, stating it was a routine process. Supposedly, they were re-interviewing everyone, including neighbors, hoping to gather some new information. In reality, they had a specific task: to get him to admit whether he had ever been inside the Hatfield family home. Initially, detectives asked if he remembered anything else from that night. Anthony recounted the same story as 18 years ago. However, this time he added a new detail. He allegedly saw a white car parked in front of Kirsten's house but didn't think much of it. Next, the police inquired about his familiarity with Kirsten and her family. Anthony said he knew them as neighbors but never interacted with Kirsten personally. He added that during those years, he got along well with other neighborhood kids. For instance, they occasionally asked him to fix their bikes or stop by for candy. Subsequently, the police asked if he had ever been inside Kirsten's house. Perhaps Kirsten's mother had asked him for help, or he had visited just to chat. However, Anthony claimed he had never been inside the house while the family lived there. For the detectives, this became a crucial moment for the interrogation. Considering the man's blood was found on the windowsill from the victim's room, they had just caught him in a lie. Thanks to this, in court, he wouldn't be able to claim that the blood got there under different circumstances, like when he visited the neighbors on another day. However, there was a problem. The house where Kirsten lived had previously belonged to Anthony's friend, and he admitted to visiting it during those years. But the blood sample on the windowsill was clearly fresh and couldn't have been left there many years ago. Nevertheless, detectives decided to move on to the main part and informed him that his blood was found in Kirsten's room and on her underwear. Anthony began denying this, repeating that he had never been inside their home. Investigators tried to extract a confession, but he consistently stuck to his denial. Then they opted to change tactics and left the room. Detective Miller entered to speak with Anthony. He brought along a photo of Kirsten, placing it on the table in front of the suspect. Anthony immediately pushed it away and avoided looking at the photo for the rest of the conversation. Miller bombarded him with a barrage of questions, anticipating that Anthony would inadvertently contradict himself, but he steadfastly maintained his innocence. Following this, they obtained a search warrant for his house and thoroughly excavated the entire area, but couldn't find any trace of Kirsten's remains or any other evidence. During the trial, Anthony persisted in denying his involvement, but the results of the DNA analysis spoke for themselves. In court, additional details emerged that police had overlooked during the initial investigation. It turned out Anthony had prior run-ins with the law. Several years before Kirsten's abduction, he had intruded into another girl's bedroom and assaulted her. He had also been imprisoned in the 80s for a weapon-related attack. This further underscored Anthony's status as a dangerous criminal, but for some reason, his past convictions were overlooked in 1997. In late 2017, a jury convicted Anthony of abducting and murdering Kirsten, handing down a life sentence. Despite the guilty verdict, Anthony refused to disclose the location of Kirsten's body throughout the trial, and police believe they may never recover her remains. The challenge stems from Anthony's job with the Park Services, which gave him knowledge of remote areas where he could have buried the body, making it nearly impossible for investigators to find. However, Kirsten's mother never gave up on trying to locate her daughter. She persistently called Anthony and visited him in prison, spending countless hours attempting to elicit information. With each encounter, she felt Anthony was on the verge of revealing the whereabouts of the body, but he never followed through. In early 2019, Anthony was killed by his cellmate, driven by personal animosity stemming from Anthony's crime against a child. As a result, the Kirsten family's sole hope to locate Kirsten's body rests on the chance that hunters or travelers may stumble upon it in remote national parks. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Graciela Garcia. A complex story unfolded in the family of Graciela Garcia from Hermiston, Oregon, USA. The renowned 49-year-old beauty salon owner disappeared on November 8, 2019. That evening, she had planned to have dinner with her 14-year-old son, Jacob, who was at his father's house. Imagine the teenager's surprise when, around 7 p.m., instead of his mother, his stepfather, Romero, appeared at the doorstep delivering food. Typically, the man was not known for his care and attention. He did not make efforts to connect with the boy, even though they lived in the same house. Nonetheless, Jacob did not suspect anything was wrong. The stepfather explained that Graciela had fallen asleep, so he came instead. After they said goodbye, the boy went to his room and checked his phone. There were 2 missed calls and a text from his mom. When he tried to call her back, he reached her voicemail. Jacob was very worried that his mother didn't respond. It was a bad sign because she was always reachable, especially since they had planned to meet. After a short while, the boy decided to tell his older brother and sisters about the situation. That evening, none of them could get through to her. Everyone thought that the mother had indeed gone to bed early and would get in touch the next day. However, the family was also concerned that her phone was unavailable to clients, as it served as a link between them and Graciela. Later, the younger daughter, Gabby, often recalled a strange conversation with her mother. Initially happy about the meeting, the woman became sad and thoughtful. Then she seriously informed the children that they should know where she kept important documents and money, just in case. Graciela seemed to be worried about something. She showed them the safe and shared the PIN code. She also added that the money and the house deed belonged to them, which couldn't be said about her current husband, Quack Romero. Gabby was frightened by the conversation. Her mother was healthy and relatively young. She asked her mother what prompted this talk, but Graciela didn't elaborate. "No one ever knows what the future holds," she mysteriously replied. Surprisingly, over time, Graciela's words became prophetic. Gabby often wondered if her mother could have anticipated the tragedy or if her disappearance was just an unfortunate coincidence. Graciela Garcia was born on October 6, 1970, in Mexico. Her family was among the working class, seeking a better future for their children. Her parents decided to immigrate to the USA, where they eventually settled in Hermiston, Oregon. At the time of the move, Graciela was still very young, so she didn't remember the hardships of changing her place of residence. She graduated from Umatilla High School, which primarily served low-income students. All students there received free lunches and breakfasts, with 66% of the students being Hispanic. Graciela easily found friends among them. Her sociability and natural charm made her stand out. Later, she enrolled in Blue Mountain College's business department. From childhood, she had dreamed of pursuing hairdressing and, ideally, opening her own beauty salon. Graciela was determined and hardworking, and she sincerely believed that with the right approach, her plans could be achieved. By February 2006, she became the owner of Carr's Beauty Salon. Thanks to her talent and charisma, she soon became well known in society. Moreover, she was always well-dressed, which contributed to the establishment's image. She loved her work and had a great knowledge of the latest beauty trends, so there was no shortage of clients. Over time, some of them became friends of Graciela and were welcome in her home. Overall, her name was well regarded among the people of the town. Besides her successful career, her personal life was also interesting and full of happy events. In her youth, she met a man with whom she fell deeply in love. He was her first love. With him, Graciela had daughters Annabelle and Gabriela, often simply called Gabby. The couple did not stay together for long. As the man left the family, apparently his feelings for the woman changed over time. Left as a single mother, she didn't despair, but focused on self-improvement and earned a degree in cosmetology. Later, fate brought her together with a man of Mexican descent. He was a kind soul, and Graciela liked him very much. She eventually married him. According to the children, she never regretted this decision. He was attentive not only to her, but also to her children, accepting them as his own. Later, the family was blessed with sons Arthur and Jacob. Nonetheless, the man still affectionately referred to Annabelle and Gabriela as his girls. Gabby recalled considering her stepfather her real father, as he always supported, protected, and cared for them. The couple did everything to ensure their family remained united and happy. Raising 4 children did not distract Graciela from her passion. On the contrary, whenever she attended professional meetings, she took the children with her. The family always traveled together, which became a lovely tradition for everyone. Thanks to this, they visited many cities, got acquainted with local attractions and cultural features. Moreover, they didn't forget about their roots, often visiting Mexico. It was a good time for the Garcia family. Everyone tried their best to make the others happy. Unfortunately, after 17 years, the couple separated. The man and woman didn't want to torment each other with cooled feelings. They cherished the respectful relationship that had developed over many years. After the divorce, their interaction remained warm and strong. The father was always in touch with the children and saw them regularly. Graciela shared custody of their youngest son with her ex-husband. The other children were adults and lived separately from their parents, but they always maintained constant contact with the family, celebrated holidays together, and often consulted with each other. Graciela navigated the divorce process with composure, maintaining her optimism and self-belief. Remarkably, even during this challenging time, her ex-husband conducted himself with honor and understanding. Her beauty salon continued to operate as normal, and she devoted all her available time and effort towards its growth. Graciela immersed herself in her beloved work, taking a break only on Sundays, which she spent in the company of her family and close friends. The unexpected visit on the morning of November 9, 2019, Romero stopped by Annabelle's, Graciela's eldest daughter. She was surprised by the unexpected visit from her mother's new husband. The man told her about his wife's disappearance. According to him, after meeting with Jacob the previous night, he returned home and lay down next to his sleeping wife. But in the morning, he found she wasn't there. After checking the house, he realized that she had gone somewhere. Romero tried calling and texting Graciela, but she didn't respond. He also explained that he visited Annabelle, hoping she might know something. However, the daughter had no such information. Moreover, she was shocked by Romero's words and his reaction to the situation. He was crying and seemed genuinely distressed. It was odd for her to see him this way, as he had never shown any emotions around them, except perhaps indifference. Romero also mentioned that Graciela had been acting strangely lately. He even suggested that she might have found someone else. He didn't deny that his wife might have needed a break from their relationship. In general, he wasn't sure she was genuinely happy with him and considered any reason for her disappearance. Annabelle found the man's words insincere and his tears theatrical. Moreover, she indeed started to worry about her mother as she found his behavior suspicious. Romero had always avoided communication with his wife's children, and suddenly, for some reason, he decided to turn to them after Romero left. The girl decided to inform the rest of the family about what had happened. Where did the homeowner go? Graciela's children gathered around her house, determined to finally find out what was happening. Her car was parked in the driveway, so if she had decided to leave Romero, she surely would have done so in her car. The second thing that caught their eye was the perfect order in their mother's house. Everything was so tidy that it looked overly perfect. If she was going somewhere, her belongings and accessories would be scattered all over the room, and she would spend a long time in front of the mirror choosing an outfit for the new day. She loved her jewelry, yet at first glance, she had left all her precious items at home. Graciela didn't even wear her favorite rings and necklaces, which she wore every day, not to mention other personal items. Everyone was concerned about what could have compelled their mother to leave in such a state. Their imagination painted terrifying pictures, one of which was that she had fled. While going around the house, Gabby found something strange. A large blanket was lying in the washing machine. This could not but catch her attention, as their mother always taught them not to overload the appliances. The blanket was clearly heavy, and someone else had washed it, apparently Romero himself. It was unlikely he would engage in household chores. Usually, Graciela took care of the house. Then, what could this mean? Definitely that he was trying to hide something. However, the man did not comment on this in any way, citing that he does not pay attention to such details. Later, it was established that along with the homeowner, the following items disappeared from the house: passport, driver's license, and mobile phone. On November 11th, Annabelle contacted law enforcement, visiting the police station. She was surprised to find out that Romero had not informed the police about his wife's disappearance, even though he knew about it since the 9th or perhaps earlier. Thus, Graciela's eldest daughter was the first to file a missing person report for her mother. So, who was Romero, and why didn't Graciela's family warm up to him? She met him a while after her divorce. Romero was one of her beauty salon's clients. Initially, their interaction was based on friendship. Later, the man took the bold step of asking the beautiful and successful woman out. Mrs. Garcia accepted his invitation, and before she knew it, their relationship evolved into something more. When she introduced him to her family, they noted his excessive aloofness and cold demeanor. Annabelle and Gabby shared that they tried multiple times to connect with him, but Romero did not reciprocate. Graciela's children were puzzled by such behavior, but attributed it to individual personality differences, especially compared to their mother's past relationships. They genuinely wanted to understand her partner and the motives driving him. Sometimes he appeared odd and unsociable to them. They couldn't grasp how such a vibrant and joyous woman could fall for someone so dry. Nonetheless, they respected her choice. When their mother announced her upcoming marriage, everyone supported her and shared in the joy of the occasion, especially the girls, because they wanted to see her happy and loved. Romero's arrogance and restraint were noted even by guests on the wedding day. Some even thought he was overly jealous as he monopolized the bride's attention. When Graciela's young grandchildren came to congratulate the newlyweds, Sanchez treated them with disdain rather than affection and tenderness. It was clear he didn't want to share his wife with anyone, even her family. After that, Graciela's relatives found it hard to conceal their true feelings about the man. Annabelle even openly stated she did not consider him a stepfather, let alone a father. All they wanted was to maintain normal relations, as seen in civilized families. After the wedding, the newlyweds moved in together into Graciela's house, along with her youngest son, Jacob. The teenager shared that shortly after, Romero began acting as if he were the sole owner. According to the boy, the honeymoon period was short-lived. He noticed that his mother initially tried to set personal boundaries, but being non-confrontational, she quickly gave in. This seemed to suit Romero, who was quick-tempered and never the first to apologize in order to avoid creating tension in the family. Graciela conceded to him over time. It seemed she realized she had rushed into the marriage. In heart-to-heart conversations, she confessed feeling constrained and oppressed. Her husband controlled her and wouldn't let her go anywhere alone, yet she never spoke of wanting to leave the abusive relationship. It appeared that Graciela was still in love with him. Everyone began to understand that she had tied herself to the wrong man. He was jobless and dependent on his wife. This greatly frustrated her family. He was a manipulator, controlling her every move and threatening her friendships. His jealousy was excessive, limiting her social circle to only her family, which affected her work. Her loved ones noticed her decline, but felt powerless to intervene as she was an adult making her own choices. In 2018, Graciela announced her decision to relocate her beauty salon to her home, explaining it was more convenient for her. Her family was skeptical about this idea, since they had never heard her mention such a plan in the 12 years since the salon's opening. Later, some clients mentioned that Romero often hung around the salon, creating a bit of tension, as if the warm atmosphere had been lost. Some believed that Graciela made this change to solve a problem, but others doubted that the idea originated from her, suspecting that her jealous husband insisted on the change. Nevertheless, she continued to express her enthusiasm for the expected changes, noting that working from home allowed her to stay close to Jacob and Romero. By the end of the year, she and her husband were renovating a room for the salon, but the unexpected setup dragged on, only being completed in May 2019. Despite the closure, her reputation remained intact, and a rumor of the studio's reopening attracted a queue of clients months in advance, including new visitors. She was excited about her professional success, but became increasingly reticent about her personal life. Graciela unexpectedly asked her daughter Gabby to pick her up. Gabby was far away, but Graciela insisted. Then, when they reunited, Graciela seemed to relax and assured Gabby that everything was fine, attributing her request to a fight with her husband. However, Gabby remained uneasy and increasingly worried about her mother. After Annabelle contacted the police, the relationship between Graciela's family and her husband deteriorated completely. He seemed angered by their decision to inform law enforcement. Romero presented an official theory of his wife's disappearance, claiming she decided to take some time alone or had gone to another man and would soon show up. This was his response to anyone trying to clarify the situation. The police report about Graciela's disappearance did not go unnoticed. Investigators launched an investigation, not ruling out the possibility that the missing woman could have been a victim of a crime. They first searched Graciela's home, where her relatives confirmed that only a few personal items were missing, with nothing else raising suspicion. The investigation included interviews with her children, her husband, and others close to the family, including her ex-husband, but nothing substantial was learned. All of them unanimously expressed doubt about Romero's behavior, though he cooperated with detectives, consenting to a home search, participating in interrogations, providing his DNA, and undergoing a polygraph, with no grounds for his arrest. The investigation into Graciela's disappearance progressed. Analysis of her phone records identified the last signal near a Washington bridge on November 9th at 12:30 p.m., after which the device was deactivated. Her bank accounts and social media remained untouched. Hundreds of witnesses were interviewed, and all of Graciela's known haunts were searched, but to no avail. The investigators deemed her unexplained vanishing highly suspicious. About 4 months into the investigation, the Hermiston police issued a public statement providing no confirmed details about her last known whereabouts. Despite Romero's failure to report her disappearance, the authorities made no specific accusations against him. This stance by law enforcement frustrated Graciela's relatives, leading to a decline in their communication with the authorities, with the missing woman's children having to personally contact the station for case updates. Public engagement, as of March 2020, showed no advancements in the search for Graciela. Consequently, her family turned to the media, hoping to draw public attention to their ordeal and solicit assistance in gathering any information they believed could be significant. Graciela's daughter, Gabby, primarily communicated with the press. She expressed her family's frustration over being uninformed for months and criticized the police for it. Gabby implored the investigators to focus more on finding her mother. The Garcia family suspected foul play in Graciela's disappearance, citing several indicators, particularly the condition of her belongings and the strange situation at home. In addition to media coverage, posters and flyers describing the missing 49-year-old Latina woman, approximately 1.6 meters tall and weighing around 62 kilograms with dyed blonde hair, were distributed throughout the city. Graciela's children also requested a change in the detective team handling the case, suspecting bias and collusion with Romero, as these individuals were acquainted with each other. The family voiced concerns over numerous inconsistencies in the case, such as the discovery that Sanchez's phone was turned off on the day of his wife's disappearance, and his behavior not resembling that of a person alarmed by the sudden vanishing of a loved one. The Garcia family demanded the suspect's arrest. The police chief, Jason Edmiston, promptly responded to these accusations, confirming Mrs. Garcia's disappearance as suspicious and possibly involving foul play. However, this was just one hypothesis, and he assured the investigation remained impartial, guided by evidence and circumstances. Edmiston dismissed any allegations of social connections between Romero and law enforcement as unfounded and mentioned the spread of misinformation hindering the investigation. He described the case as ongoing and developing, with certain information necessarily kept confidential. Authorities also sought assistance from the FBI. Edmiston expressed frustration over public criticism of the police's actions without understanding the legal complexities. Meanwhile, Gabby announced a fundraiser to hire a private detective, a move perceived as a critique of the police's handling of the investigation, suggesting their inefficacy. On the first anniversary of Graciela's disappearance, her family organized a memorial event attended by friends and acquaintances who reminisced about her vibrant and cheerful nature. They prayed for her safe return and lit candles, later placing signs outside the police station, urging the search for Graciela Garcia to continue. In September 2023, a major incident involving Romero made headlines. He was attacked and severely injured, requiring surgery. Speculation suggested that Graciela's brother, Mason Garcia, had shot the missing woman's husband multiple times. However, the media did not provide details about the event or any legal consequences for Mason. It appeared that Graciela's family had grown frustrated with the police's apparent inaction regarding Sanchez, prompting one of them to take the matter into their own hands, potentially leading to a more disturbing outcome. The disappearance of Graciela Garcia remains an unsolved mystery, leaving her family in agonizing uncertainty. This state of not knowing is profoundly detrimental to their health and mental well-being. Over time, one might come to terms with loss, but the difficulty of living in limbo is significantly harder. It remains unknown whether Graciela is alive and her children are left with nothing but to pray that the situation will soon become clear and that those responsible will face justice. Ultimately, no crime is perfect. Sometimes there's just a lack of motive and evidence. Canny Ong Lay Kian was born in Malaysia on July 18, 1974, to a close-knit family with one older sister. She shared a particularly strong bond with her parents. In 1995, she moved to the USA to pursue higher education and a career in information technology. It was there that she met Brandon, a U.S. citizen of Singaporean Chinese descent, whose parents had emigrated over 20 years prior. Their initial friendship blossomed into romance, with Brandon becoming a constant source of support and encouragement in Canny's life. The couple tied the knot in 2001, and Canny seemed to have achieved everything she had ever dreamed of in both her professional and personal life. By 2003, Canny was working as an analyst in San Diego, planning her future with Brandon and hoping to start a family. However, a series of events that year took a devastating turn. Canny's father, Ong Bi Jeng, was diagnosed with cancer, prompting Canny to return to Malaysia to care for him and support her family during this difficult time. On June 1, 2003, Canny arrived in Malaysia with Brandon, who returned to the USA a few days later. Canny remained in Kuala Lumpur, dedicating herself to her father's care at a clinic in the capital. Despite the distance, Canny and Brandon remained close, spending hours on the phone every day, discussing everything from their daily lives to their two beloved cats, whom Canny jokingly scolded Brandon for overfeeding. Their conversations were almost like those of parents discussing their children. Canny's father had undergone a kidney removal surgery, but fortunately, his health was steadily improving, and he was on the road to recovery. This prompted Canny to plan her return to the USA on June 14, 2003. The evening before her flight, on June 13, 2003, Canny organized a farewell dinner at a restaurant situated in a popular mall. She invited her mother, Pearlie, her sister Elsie, and close friends to join her. When Canny and her mother arrived at the restaurant, they were running late because they had struggled to find a parking spot on the street in front of the mall. Canny had to drive into the underground parking lot, which came with a fee. However, her mother's concern was not about the cost, but rather the poor lighting in the parking area. After parking their car, they made their way to the second floor, where the restaurant was located. Canny was thrilled to see her childhood friends, and they had a lot to talk about and catch up on. A few hours into dinner, Canny noticed her grandmother, Pearlie, looked tired. She asked her mother if Pearlie wanted to go home, and Pearlie replied that she had a very busy day ahead, but didn't mind leaving, telling her friends she would be back soon. Canny, her mother, and her sister Elsie then headed to the payment terminal to pay for their parking. The terminal was located on the first floor of the mall, while the parking was underground. As they stood in the queue, Canny realized she had left the parking ticket in the car. She told her sister and mother to stay in line and went down to retrieve the ticket. By the time she returned, the queue had disappeared, but her sister and mother were already gone. After 10 more minutes, Elsie started calling Canny, but the first call went unanswered, and the second one was redirected to voicemail. Something was clearly amiss. Elsie and Pearlie rushed to the parking lot, only to find that Canny's car was gone. They searched the area repeatedly, but Canny had vanished with the vehicle. Pearlie was convinced that something was wrong, as Canny would never drive off without a word. The parking lot's poor lighting made it difficult to see, but the surveillance cameras could provide some clues. Initially, the mall security was hesitant to share the footage with Canny's family, but they eventually relented after her mother's desperate pleas. Around midnight, Pearlie and Elsie watched the footage, which left them stunned and confirmed their worst fears. The footage showed Canny's car speeding out of the underground parking lot with someone else behind the wheel. Although the quality was poor, it was clear that the driver was likely a man, and Canny sat beside him in the passenger seat, pressed against the door, trying to keep herself as far away from him as possible. After watching the footage, Pearlie rushed to a police station and filed a report on her daughter's disappearance and suspected kidnapping. The police launched an investigation, and Canny's family and friends frantically searched for her in Kuala Lumpur, scanning the area for her distinctive purple proton tiara. As the search continued, Brandon, Canny's husband, grew increasingly concerned. He repeatedly tried calling his wife's number, but couldn't get through. He then phoned her mother, who broke the disturbing news to him. Brandon was devastated by Canny's disappearance, and Pearlie could hear his sobs over the phone. As dawn broke, Canny's friends and relatives reluctantly ended their search, feeling defeated and hopeless. The police were disseminating information about Canny's disappearance and conducting their own investigation, but so far, there were no promising leads. The footage from the mall's parking lot where Canny was last seen did not provide any leads on the identity of the driver. It had been more than 72 hours since Canny's family and friends had last seen her, and it was clear to the authorities that if she had indeed been kidnapped, it was not for financial gain. If money was the motive, the kidnapper would have already contacted them demanding a ransom. The lack of progress in the case was ominous. That same day, the police made a disturbing discovery. Canny's car was found abandoned on a city street. The front right tire was in a terrible state, indicating that it had been driven while flat for some time, eventually shredding it. In the back of the car, on the passenger seat, there was a large red stain. Forensic experts collected evidence from the car, including scrapings from the back seat and fingerprints from the steering wheel and other areas. The vehicle held a lot of clues, which will be examined in more detail later. Canny's family and friends held on to hope, praying for her safe return. But their hopes were devastatingly crushed the next day, after the car was found. On June 17th, a road worker noticed a strong, foul smell emanating from a nearby manhole along a highway. Upon lifting the lid, he was met with the horrific sight of a body being burned using 2 car tires and sticks. A team of top forensic experts from the Royal Malaysian Police rushed to the scene. The body was concealed under 2 car tires filled with concrete, which were originally used as road sign stands. Whoever hid it there had attempted to make identification more difficult. Although the family's worst fears seemed confirmed, Canny's mother, Pearlie, refused to accept her daughter's death until officially confirmed. Until then, they would continue to hold on to hope that she would miraculously reappear alive. The family went to the morgue, but the doctor told them they still couldn't confirm the body was Canny's. To investigate, family members provided DNA samples for a comparative analysis. The test results confirmed their worst fears. The body was indeed their daughter's. Although some reports suggest that the family identified the jewelry on the body even before the DNA test, Canny's mother, Pearlie, held on to hope that her daughter was alive until the very end. It's impossible to imagine the emotional turmoil she endured. The autopsy revealed that Canny suffered 2 stab wounds to her abdomen. Additionally, a medical forensics expert found signs of strangulation, including a cloth tied around her neck in multiple knots. Furthermore, semen was found inside her body, which served as a source of DNA evidence. A few days after Canny's body was discovered, a significant event raised concerns about the effectiveness of law enforcement agencies. Undercover policeman Subramaniam Ravichandran reported to his superiors that on the night of Kenny's disappearance, he and his partner were on patrol in Kuala Lumpur, riding a motorcycle and dressed in civilian clothes. They came across a car parked incorrectly, taking up half of the road, and decided to investigate. As they approached the driver's door, Ravichandran saw a man behind the wheel and a woman sitting next to him. He knocked on the window, and when the man rolled it down partway, Ravichandran showed him his police ID and asked what they were doing. The driver claimed they were just chatting and not doing anything illegal. Ravichandran then asked to see their IDs. While the driver handed over the documents, the woman in the passenger seat made strange hand gestures, appearing to signal for help whenever the driver turned his head away from her. Having noticed a problem, the officer asked the driver to get out of the car. However, the driver responded aggressively, claiming that Ravichandran was not a police officer, but a thief. Before leaving, he rolled up the window and reached for the ignition key. Fearing the car would drive off, the policeman drew his pistol and shot out the right front tire. Despite this, the car sped away. Ravichandran and his partner gave chase on their motorcycle, but curiously, they were unable to catch up to the car, even though it had a flat tire. It was common practice in the Malaysian police at the time for officers not to call for backup or report incidents, which is why the officer on duty did not alert anyone about what had happened. A few days later, the purple Proton tiara belonging to Kenny Ong was found abandoned. Although the chase was unsuccessful, the police now had identification documents left behind by the driver. The occupants of the car were identified as 27-year-old Ahmad Najib Benares and Kenny Ong. If the officer had acted differently, Kenny Ong might still be alive. Unfortunately, Ravichandran only reported the incident to his superiors after Kenny's body was discovered. The sole positive aspect of that fateful night was that the officer had managed to obtain documents on the suspect. In addition to Kenny's family, a large number of Malaysians attended her farewell ceremony. For Brandon, the loss of his beloved wife was an irreparable blow. Meanwhile, the police launched a manhunt for Ahmad Najib. Further investigation revealed that Ahmad Najib's address listed in his documents was false, but his name was genuine, making it possible to track him down through various means. The police searched for the name in the Registry of Documented Marriages and the National Agency of Social Support, and a match was found. Ahmad Najib Aris was born and raised in Muir, Malaysia, as the second of 4 siblings. Due to family financial constraints, he dropped out of school in 1998 to work and support his family. Later, he moved to Kuala Lumpur, got married, and had 2 children. Since 2000, he had been working as a cabin cleaner for Malaysia Airlines. Knowing his wife's name and her workplace, the police started monitoring her. Specifically, she worked at one of the metropolitan banks. After waiting for her shift to end, police officers in plain clothes followed her, thereby discovering her home address. Now the police knew Ahmad's residence, but to avoid alarming him, they needed to ensure he was inside the house. For 3 days, they kept the house under surveillance, but the suspect failed to appear. The investigators began to suspect that Ahmad Najib might no longer live with his family, but this was a premature conclusion. On the 4th day of surveillance, around 4 a.m., a taxi pulled up to the house and Ahmad Najib got out of it. Within a minute, he was handcuffed and taken to the police station for questioning. News of the arrest and the suspect's identity quickly spread to the press. Many people who knew Ahmad Najib were shocked to learn that he was responsible for kidnapping and murdering Kenny Ong. To them, he appeared to be a devoted husband and caring father of 2, giving the impression of a good person. However, as the investigation unfolded, officers came to realize that Ahmad was not what he seemed. During his initial interrogation, Ahmad remained calm and insisted on speaking only with the head of the Criminal Investigation Division. However, as evidence mounted against him, he began to deny his involvement. The turning point came when he was presented with 2 identification cards that he had given to the duty officer on the night of Kenny's kidnapping. Furthermore, the police found bloodstains on his jacket and jeans, which they claimed would likely match Kani's DNA. It was only when Ahmad realized that the officers had irrefutable proof that he finally confessed to kidnapping and murdering Kani Ong. 10 days after the kidnapping, on June 23, 2003, Ahmad was brought to court, where he reaffirmed his confession. In the following days, the police conducted an investigation, during which Ahmad reenacted the crime, showing them all the locations where he had been with Kani and detailing how he forcibly made her have sex with him, killed her, and attempted to dispose of her body. The police found corroborating evidence at the underground parking lot where the crime began. Security cameras had captured Ahmad Najib waiting for his former boss, whom he allegedly wanted to take revenge on, although this motive was never confirmed. Lying in wait, Ahmad saw Kani searching for something in her car and decided to take advantage of the situation. He pushed her into the car, threatening her that if she tried to escape or call for help, she would face consequences. Kani became dazed and complying with his orders, and Ahmad then got into the driver's seat and sped out of the parking lot. Having stopped in an industrial area, Ahmad started harassing Kani. But just then, a plainclothes police officer pulled up to the car. According to Ahmad, he managed to escape the pursuit, and although the officer had his documents, he didn't let Kani go. Later, Ahmad stopped his car on the street to replace a flat tire, which had been punctured by a bullet. As he stopped, he noticed a woman sitting in a parked car nearby. He approached her, asking to borrow a jack to change the tire, but then saw Kani signaling the woman with her hands, who handed him the jack. Ahmad gave up on changing the tire and drove off immediately. A bit later, Ahmad Najib Aris stopped at an isolated location where he threatened Kani with a knife and forced her to have intimate relations with him. Afterwards, he drove to another area where he once again forced Kani to comply with his demands. Both Ahmad and Kani were in the back seat, and Kani was pleading for mercy, but instead, he took her life. He then hid her body in a manhole near a highway, drove the car to another location, and abandoned it. It wasn't until 16 hours later that he returned to the scene, armed with a gasoline canister, in an attempt to destroy evidence of the crime. A DNA analysis confirmed that the semen found inside Kani's body matched Ahmad Najib Aris. His DNA was also found in the car, as were his fingerprints, which provided irrefutable proof of his guilt. The analysis also revealed that the blood found on his jacket and jeans belonged to Kani. The trial commenced on September 15, 2003, a mere 3 months after Kani's death. This case became one of the most contentious in Malaysia, garnering significant attention from the media and the public. This high-profile trial drew in not only ordinary Malaysians and journalists, but also individuals seeking to capitalize on the situation, including a surplus of attorneys representing Ahmad. Although Ahmad confessed to his crimes during the investigation, and there was substantial evidence, including DNA evidence, he didn't plead guilty at his first trial. Instead, he claimed that his confession was made under police pressure. However, the judge who took Ahmad's confession shortly after his arrest testified that Ahmad showed no signs of physical abuse and appeared calm and relaxed at the time. Later, Ahmad's attorneys shifted their focus, arguing that the victim, Kani, was in the car with Ahmad voluntarily. They claimed that Kani, a black belt in Taekwondo, didn't try to escape, implying that she wasn't being held against her will. However, this argument was dismissed, as people respond differently in critical situations. Undeterred, the defense team presented another version, suggesting that Kani had engaged in consensual sex with Ahmad and died accidentally from strangulation, which they claimed was used to enhance sensations during the act. However, forensic experts challenged and denied this theory. The cloth around Kani's neck was tied in multiple knots, suggesting that Ahmad had no intention of untying it. In fact, the cloth was tied so tightly that the skin underneath was the only undamaged area on the body, as it was protected from the fire. Moreover, the cloth was specifically designed for wiping airplane windows, and given that the defendant worked as a cabin cleaner, this connection further implicated him in the crime. At this point, Ahmad's lawyers were out of options and advised him to remain silent and not testify. Many people wondered why Canny didn't escape from the car when she had at least 2 opportunities to do so. Unfortunately, we will never know the answer, as it's possible that she was paralyzed with fear and unable to flee. On February 23, 2005, Ahmad Najib Aris was convicted on all charges related to the crime against Canny's sexual integrity. The judge concluded that the evidence pointed to Ahmad as the sole perpetrator. Ahmad was sentenced to 20 years in prison and 10 strokes of the cane, the highest penalty allowed under Malaysian law. Additionally, he was sentenced to death for taking Canny's life. In Malaysia, the method of execution differs significantly from that in the USA, where lethal injection is used. In Malaysia, a more cost-effective method is employed, involving ropes instead of expensive drugs. Ahmad's legal team made 2 unsuccessful attempts to appeal the sentence. In 2010, Ahmad wrote to the head of state requesting that his death sentence be commuted to life imprisonment. Although he reiterated his claim of innocence in the letter, his request for clemency was denied. On September 23, 2016, more than 13 years after Canny's death, the 40-year-old Ahmad Najib was put to death, carrying out his sentence. Lisa Maria Kaiser was born in 1994 in a large family where her 8 siblings also grew up. It was a large, but far from prosperous family. Parents were busy with their own problems and did not show love and care towards their children. Moreover, there were rumors that abuse and violence were rampant in the family. The story in question unfolded in the year 2020, at the very time when the whole world was consumed with the fight against COVID-19. In one corner of Ecuador, quietly and unnoticed, truly terrible events were unfolding. Here, in the small parish of Pifo, on the northeastern outskirts of Quito, the protagonist of this tragic story was born and raised. Lisa Maria Kaiser, a woman with an enigmatic gaze, whose life story became a true Ecuadorian nightmare. On that unfortunate Tuesday, October 27, 2020, Lisa sent several messages to the father of her children, David. They were words full of despair, because their paths with David at that time had already almost parted. In these lines, she confessed her love for him and her unexpected new pregnancy. However, in subsequent messages, Lisa wrote that life was losing its meaning for her, and the decision to terminate the pregnancy was inevitable. Throughout the night, Lisa pleaded with David to come to her, but his refusal was resolute. His parents also urged him to stay home, and David took their advice. In the early morning hours of October 28th, neighbors in Lisa's home heard a faint cry for help. Looking out the window, they found a woman lying on the floor with signs of vomiting. The neighbors rushed to help her, immediately calling emergency services. The doctors and police arrived and found Lisa in a critical condition, but still alive. After administering first aid, she was immediately hospitalized. However, in the house, her children, a girl of 5 and a boy of 9, were found unconscious. The doctors were unable to help them. Their little hearts had stopped beating at that point. Authorities learned the identity of the children's father and contacted David Acosta, who, upon learning of the tragedy, immediately arrived on the scene accompanied by his father. He was informed that Lisa was in the hospital and his children were found without signs of life. After several days of fighting for life in the hospital, Lisa finally regained consciousness. By that time, the investigators, guided by their findings, had presented the prosecutor's office with sufficiently convincing arguments to issue an arrest warrant for this mysterious woman. When she was released from the hospital, she was immediately transferred to a social rehabilitation center. The authorities insisted that Lisa undergo a psychological and psychiatric evaluation, as her state of mind required further investigation as part of the upcoming trial. Lisa ended up in a rehabilitation center, and doctors and psychologists took up their work. In a conversation with a criminal psychologist, Lisa opened up about her difficult childhood, where her parents fought and abused each other and their children. Her childhood had a noticeable impact on her state of mind, and moments of quarrels and her parents' divorce became an integral part of her memories. Such a childhood forced Lisa to go to work from the age of 11 to be able to study. The girl strived to escape from her dysfunctional family and build her future in a different way. The expert report also indicated that Lisa had been abused. She talked about how, after several years of marriage, David, her husband, changed dramatically. He began to humiliate his spouse and then to raise his hand against her. On the day of the tragedy with the children, investigators working at the scene found several glasses with liquid residue on the table. These finds later revealed traces of epilepsy pills belonging to one of the children, as well as other chemicals requiring identification. Police officers thoroughly searched the house, and after noticing a strange odor in the kitchen, noticed a suspicious area under the utility room. They broke down the barrier and found a lifeless body wrapped in a blanket, with characteristic signs of having been there for a long time. Later, further investigation revealed that the discovered body belonged to Jaime Yanchaguano, a 28-year-old who had been in contact with Lisa. Jaime had been reported missing by his family days before the gruesome discovery. According to Rosa Yanchaguano, Jaime's sister, he was last seen on October 18th. Rosa told investigators that after her brother disappeared, Lisa called several times inquiring about him. Lisa claimed to have received a text message from Jaime in which he wrote how some illegal substance traffickers were holding him by force and demanding a ransom of $8,000. In doing so, she strongly cautioned Jaime's family against contacting the police. It became a key point in a complex investigation that required detectives to not only solve the tragedy, but to find out if there were any other hidden victims in the story. During her interrogation, Lisa said that in 2020, while working in a cookie factory, she met Jaime Yanchaguano. According to her, he became just a friend. Lisa sought to return to her husband, who was allegedly going to blackmail Jaime to get money from him. David made it clear to his wife that if she did not help him, he would divorce her. Later, David handed Lisa a white powder and told her to slip it into Jaime's food. When the task was completed, Jaime fell asleep and never woke up again. Realizing what had happened, Lisa tried in desperation to get her husband back, but all was unsuccessful, so she swallowed the same poison and gave it to her children. However, it did not have the expected effect on her, and Lisa turned to her neighbors for help, trying to save herself from the same horror that had befallen her children. After her testimony, investigators launched an investigation, but no evidence of David's involvement in the events was ever found. No one close to the couple could have predicted that Lisa Maria and David Acosta's fate would lead them through such a difficult ordeal. When they met, Lisa was only 16 years old and still in high school. She was a dreamy and romantic girl, and David was a strong and determined young man. Soon their friendship developed into strong feelings, and this led to Lisa's unexpected pregnancy. Although the young people's families did not approve of their relationship, David's parents always supported their son and welcomed Lisa into their family. In difficult moments, David's family became a true support for the young couple. Inviting Lisa to live with them, they made every effort to make sure she finished high school. When Lisa turned 18, the lovers got married. 2 years later, the young family was waiting for the appearance of a second child, a little daughter. David's parents decided to provide the young couple with their own housing. They gave Lisa and David a separate apartment, which became for them a corner of family happiness. But over time, the couple's relationship began to deteriorate. It was obvious that both spouses sinned of cheating, which led to mistrust and disappointment. Boundless love, which seemed unshakable, began to weaken. To make matters worse, Lisa complained of psychological abuse from David, which led her to seek help from the police. Eventually, she was granted a protective order, and David was forced to leave the family home. It was at this point that Lisa began to use her position and blackmail David, demanding money for the opportunity to see their joint children. The beginning of September 2020 brought an unexpected challenge into Lisa's life that drastically changed her daily routine. The young mother discovered that her oldest son was suffering from seizures, and in desperation, she went to the emergency room at Baca Ortiz Hospital. After stabilizing the baby's condition, the doctors decided to conduct a series of tests, revealing a focal form of epilepsy, a severe disease that affects a specific part of the brain. The doctors urged Lissa to undergo additional tests, including MRI scans, and to consult with specialists as soon as possible. However, the mother, as if ignoring the seriousness of the situation, decided not to follow these recommendations. A month later, the situation was repeated. Lissa was back in the emergency room with her son suffering from the same symptoms. After reviewing the boy's medical history, the doctors discovered that the mother had somehow failed to fulfill the prescriptions given to her earlier. No tests had been taken, consultations with specialists had not taken place, and it seems that the son had not received the necessary treatment. The doctors, concerned for the child's welfare, once again reminded Lissa of the importance of following medical advice. They warned her that ignoring the doctor's advice could lead to legal consequences, as she could be putting her son's health and well-being at risk. However, this time too, Lissa disregarded the doctor's warning. A couple weeks after discovering her son's illness, she decided to call David. The serious tone in her voice worried David. She informed him that a social worker would be coming to see her shortly to discuss their son's diagnosis and retirement. On the day of the appointment, David showed up, but the social worker was long gone. To brighten the waiting time, Lissa offered him a drink. However, as David drank the drink, he suddenly felt unwell. His condition was worsening, and the social worker had not shown up, so David decided to go home to get something to deal with his discomfort. The next morning, David woke up in a terrible state. He could barely speak because his tongue was numb. Every step caused discomfort, and his eyes hurt. His parents insisted on calling an ambulance. David was taken to the hospital where he spent several days. Tests revealed the presence of a psychoactive substance in his system, but given that he hadn't used anything of the sort, David began to speculate how this could have happened. Eventually, he speculated that perhaps someone had deliberately slipped him some substance in a public place. David was grateful for his life and realized that what had happened could have ended much worse. In early October 2020, Lissa made the decision to hire a nanny for her children. Her cousin Patricia recommended her friend Bertha, a responsible 48-year-old woman looking for work. On Monday, October 5th, Bertha arrived at the young mother's house. Lissa urged her to take a pill that she said helped prevent infection with the COVID-19 virus, an epidemic of which was at its height at the time. Claiming that it was a highly effective natural remedy, Lissa convinced Bertha to swallow the medicine and enter the house. They sat down to discuss the babysitter's childcare duties. A few minutes later, Bertha began to feel sick. She felt a headache. Her stomach began to upset, and eventually she vomited. A short while later, Patricia showed up. It turned out that she had called her cousin repeatedly, but Lissa didn't answer, which alerted Patricia. She decided to check what had happened and immediately went to her house. Upon entering, she found Bertha lying on the couch, who was practically fainting already. Lissa shared with her cousin what had happened and expressed concern. Learning that Lissa still had not called an ambulance, Patricia immediately did so herself. After a while, doctors arrived and sent Bertha to the hospital. The condition of the victim managed to stabilize. Doctors diagnosed poisoning with a toxic substance, which often happens when using various medications. Doctors decided that Bertha did not tolerate some component of the composition of the pills from COVID-19. A few months before this tragic incident, in June of the same year, Lissa's former buddy, Mark Escanto, had died of poisoning. At the time, the cause of his death had gone unnoticed. But now, given all these strange circumstances, Mark's case required additional attention. Investigators scrutinized the deceased's home and found Lissa's fingerprints on the glasses used the night before Mark's death. This fact added new evidence to the investigation, pointing to Lissa's possible involvement in the incident. But suddenly, a new accusation was made against Lissa. Her own family made a shocking report to the police. It turns out that on September 2nd, the family had a family gathering where Lissa offered to let everyone taste a drink of her own making. 7 brothers and sisters of the young woman, as well as their parents, drank the unknown drink and immediately felt sick. Fortunately, no one died, but the 56-year-old mother suffered a stroke. Lissa's father claimed that while the relatives were seeking medical attention, his daughter stole $1,300 from the house. Now the investigation included not only crimes against the children and a former boyfriend, but also an incident that jeopardized the lives and health of her own family members. As it turned out, that wasn't all. Investigators encountered another strange event. In May of that year, Jose Luis Erazo, a friend of Lissa's, was found dead in his home. A few days before, Jose had suddenly disappeared, and neighbors soon smelled a rotting odor, prompting them to contact the authorities. An examination of the body initially revealed nothing suspicious, and was ruled a heart attack. But one of Jose's sisters suspected something strange and hid a bottle of alcohol found in the refrigerator. In addition, Jose's family noticed that some items were missing from the house. It turned out that Lissa and Jose were friends, and when the guy died, the alleged killer contacted his relatives by phone. With a distraught voice, she stated that Jose owed her a large sum of money, and she had to contact the family to repay the debt. This cunning plan did not work, and a little later Lissa called Jose's family again, changing her voice to conceal her identity. Identifying herself as Jose's friend, she claimed that she was pregnant by him and now had to apply for child support. Although Jose's family did not believe these stories, Lissa was not about to give up and made a third attempt to deceive them. She said she knew who was responsible for Jose's death and offered to meet to uncover the details. Had she not been arrested on charges of killing her own children in Jaime, the list of victims might have gotten longer. When the media reported the arrest of Lissa, who had poisoned 3 people, Jose's relatives understood. They immediately reported their suspicions to the authorities, and Jose's body was exhumed for forensic examination to determine the true cause of death. The relatives were not mistaken. Traces of poison were found in the remains of the deceased. On December 22, 2020, a hearing was held for Lissa Maria Kaiser for the murder of her 2 children, whose names and photos were classified, and for Jaime Ianchaguano. The trial was conducted virtually due to restrictions related to the spread of the COVID-19 virus. Lissa had been in contact from a social rehabilitation center. The prosecutor's statement said that Lissa gave her children a toxic mixture of insecticides and anti-epileptic drugs. In interrogations, she claimed that she had grown desperate and could not leave her children with her husband David, who did not care for the children. In fact, she admitted that she wished them dead. At the end of the hearing, the judge issued the defendant a court pass and ordered her remanded into custody pending trial. The children's trial next took place in 2021 at the Pichincha Provincial Court. The prosecutor presented a set of evidence to prove Lissa's guilt. Among them were statements by David, who revealed the content of messages the wife had received on the eve of the tragedy. In one of the messages, she claimed that she would take with her what belonged to her, referring to the children. She said she didn't know where her children and herself would go, heaven or hell. But now she felt as if she was in hell. Lissa added that she doesn't expect her husband to forgive her, because she knows he hated her, and now he will hate her even more. David also spoke about his unstable relationship with his wife. At the hearing, the defendant's reconstructed testimony was presented, stating that she took 2 pills that day, called for help, and then passed out. According to the reconstruction conducted by the prosecutor's office, the daughter died while still in bed, and her older brother tried to take a few steps to call for help, but fell and died. The conclusion of the forensic medical examination was extremely clear. The children died as a result of a premeditated crime. The deaths were the result of suffocation caused by pulmonary edema and intoxication caused by a mixture of epilepsy medication and other unspecified substances, presumably insecticides and disinfectant. The prosecution also charged Lissa with the death of Jaime Ianchaguano, whose body was found bricked up in the kitchen. The perpetrator was also suspected of attempting to kill David and members of her own family. The hearing raised the issue of Lissa's irresponsible attitude to her son's health after being diagnosed with localized epilepsy. The mother ignored instructions for further tests and follow-up examinations, and when the boy was hospitalized again, his condition was exacerbated by her own mother's negligence. Warnings from medical professionals did not change her attitude toward her son's treatment, leading to a threatened termination of her parental rights. Lissa's mental health investigations revealed her to be highly emotional and environmentally dependent. She sought constant attention and understanding from others and experienced severe anxiety when events did not unfold according to her plan. She also exhibited a tendency to self-harm. She attempted to say goodbye to her life at least 3 times, but was unsuccessful each time. Witnesses described her as insecure, attachment-seeking, exhibiting schizoid and erratic behavior. The findings of the psychological analysis also emphasized that on the day of the tragic events, Lisa acted with full awareness of her actions. After a long trial that lasted 10 months, Lisa Maria Kaiser was found guilty of the crime against her children. The Pichincha Provincial Court sentenced her to 34 years and 8 months imprisonment. In addition to this, she was ordered to pay David a compensation of more than $20,000. It was noted in the press that Lisa remained calm throughout the proceedings and only showed emotion when her children were mentioned. The Jaime Yanchaguano murder case, which began in August 2021, appeared to be unfinished. New details were revealed during the court hearings. Lisa admitted giving her friend a white substance mixed with alcohol, but claimed she got it from David. However, the investigation proved otherwise. According to a psychiatrist who interviewed Lisa, she did not want to take Jaime's life. She wanted to intimidate his family so she could then extort money. She did demand $8,000 as ransom. Experts called the plan disorganized, which ultimately led to the crime. In addition, forensic tests revealed that it wasn't that simple. Jaime was found to have poison in his system, and the cause of death was strangulation. The body was found with a shattered ribcage and wire around the neck. Lisa claimed that after her friend died, she decided to bury him under a back room and cement him in. The store owner's testimony confirmed that Lisa bought building materials during the days of Jaime's disappearance. After the parties' arguments, the prosecutor's office requested a new trial in April 2022. At that trial, an additional charge of extortion was filed. Lisa called Jaime's relatives, claiming he was being held by a group of gangsters, and demanded $8,000 for his release. The defense relied on the lack of conclusive evidence that Lisa was involved in Jaime's murder. Nevertheless, she was found guilty and received a 22-year prison sentence, as well as a sentence to pay $5,000 to the victim's mother. While Jaime's trial was underway, the investigation of Mark Escanto and Jose Luis Erazo, Lisa's alleged victims, was nearing completion. Mark Escanto was 48 years old, and tests conducted after his death revealed traces of the same substance that Lisa had given to her children. In addition, Mark was found to have severe inflammation of the stomach. The family's lawyer claimed that Lisa met Mark, offered him a beer, and then put the poison in the drink. A glass with Lisa and Mark's fingerprints, as well as a swab containing the woman's DNA, was provided to authorities. Alleged motives for the murder included jealousy and money. It is also known that Lisa had asked Mark to help her financially, and there is evidence that he loaned her at least $120. Mark was Lisa's first known victim. The final outcome of this case, as well as that of Jose Luis Erazo, remain unknown. They may not have been reported in the press, or the investigation may not yet have reached the stage of being formally charged and brought to trial. At the time of her brutal crimes, Lisa Maria was only 26 years old. Her high-profile criminal case has become one of the most horrific and disturbing in Ecuador's recent history. These crimes made her known throughout the country as Doña Venado. Lisa Maria Kaiser is recognized as a serial killer in Ecuador. Her victims have endured terrible suffering, and their relatives have suffered unbearable pain. The charges include 5 murders and 9 attempted murders. Under Ecuadorian law, the maximum sentence she could face is 40 years in prison. That means Lisa could be released when she turns 70 years old. It is still unclear what motivated Doña Venado to commit such horrific acts. Was her act the result of resentment for not getting what she expected in life? Many speculate that the motive was money, and in David's case, Lisa acted out of a lust for revenge, which led to the tragedy with her children. The most horrific part of this story is not only the number of victims left in the path of Doña Venado, but also the fate of 2 innocent children who could not have guessed that their mother, who gave them life, would take it away so absurdly and cruelly. Thanks for watching, guys. Jack was with you. Subscribe to the channel and don't forget to click the bell not to miss new stories from around the world. See you soon. Take care.